Welcome back, fellow Illumineers, to be our guest. We are back with another draft set review for Shimmering Skies. We're on to Emerald today. So what are we looking at in Emerald? There's some pretty decent stuff in here. I don't know if there's as much good stuff as there is in Amethyst, but there's some real good stuff. So why don't we get right into it. Previous me is going to catch you up on our rating systems that we're going through, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about Emerald. So we're going to do A, B, C, D, F as our rating system. A is first pickable and happy to first pick it. This is a bomb or just really effective card. There are commons that are absolutely within this territory. But ultimately, it's something that you're just like, you open your pack, you look at it, and you're like, yeah, this is the one for me. Love this one. Happy to have it, right? That's an A. B is, I'll first pick it, but I'm not going to be absolutely thrilled about it. But I'm definitely very happy to pick this up and have this in my deck. I will always play this card, and I'm going to kind of be picking it in the first half of the pack. C's are your, like, journeyman staples of your deck. You're almost always going to play these cards unless you've drafted so well that your deck's just crammed full of A's and B's. So you're always going to play these cards, or almost always. But you're not exactly thrilled to be taking them. You're just like, okay, these are cards that are going to fill out my deck, right? These are the cards that you want kind of in the middle to last half of the pack, and they're solid. D is, ideally, I'd like to not have this in my deck. I will play this, but I'd like to not have this in my deck if I can help it, and I'm certainly not wasting any early picks on it. These are cards that you are going to be picking up because it's the only cards left in the last third of the pack, right? Ideally, these should all be inkable. If they're that bad, you should not be taking an uninkable card that's that quality, right? And then F is don't play it. And usually that's because they're uninkable and they're like D quality and uninkable. But it could also, there could be some inkable cards that I rate as S just because they're so bad. And in that case, obviously, if they're inkable and you need ink, you're going to play them in your deck because you're only eliminating 8 cards that you drafted. So if you have, 8 uninkables that are Fs, you're going to play an F that's inkable, of course, right? But you should try never to have this anywhere near your deck, and you should only be using it as ink if I've got an inkable F in there. All right, so what are we dealing with in Emerald? Well, let's start with the one, the only, Robin Hood Timely Contestant. Yeah, another 9-drop, right? Some of these are better than others. We've had one really bad one. We've had a couple of really good ones. What am I talking about? I can count. I can do math. We've had one bad and one good. So where does Robin Hood lie on that? So all of it is about, like, what is the realistic likelihood that you can make this happen, right? And I would argue for all of these, the magic number is 6, right? 7, okay, fine. 6 is where I want to be. 5 is a dream, and less than that is ridiculous, right? And this one counts each damage on opposing characters. We're going to see one in Ruby that counts just damaged characters of ours. This is each damage on opposing characters reduces the cost by 1, which could be substantial. Like, you could easily, I don't want to say easily, that's not true. Relatively easily, like, it is reasonable to expect that by turn 5, you could have a couple of characters that you've damaged. Now, it would necessitate you not actively trading with characters. So, right, normally you want to be eliminating your opponent's characters. Shocking, I know. But there's something to be said for, if I've got Robin Hood in hand, maybe I'm trying to, stack it in such a way, and you can potentially control this. If they've got exerted characters, and you've got ones that you can run into that won't trade, but will get most of the way there. So let me tell you an example. I was doing a test draft where they had a 4-5 on the other end of the board, and I just had some small characters, but I already kind of knew I wanted to run my 1 and 3 drops into it. So I had like a 2/2 and a 3/4 or something like that. I'm like, I'm going to want to eliminate this character. And they already had a character with 2 damage on it. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to run my 3-drop into there first. And now there's 5 damage total on opposing characters. My Robin Hood costs 4. And then after I've played Robin Hood, I run the remaining character into it to eliminate their 4/5. And all of a sudden, I've got Robin Hood plus I could potentially drop 1 additional 1-drop on that time. So I think that magic number of 6 is going to be pretty easy to get with this one. 3 damage on an opposing character, I feel like, or multiple opposing characters, I feel like is going to be pretty easy. So the question then is, how does this stack up against, say, Olaf? Right? Olaf is a 6/6/3 lore, but it's got evasive instead of ward. So Robin Hood's going to be harder for them to deal with, in fact, impossible for them to deal with almost, when it first comes down. Unless you were silly and play this as your only character on board, and they've somehow drafted the horrible 3-cost Anna to force you to exert him, there's nothing else that they've got that can deal with it. So he will get to quest for 4. Olaf, on the other hand, could be removed. Really hard for it to be removed, but could be removed. In which case, he might not quest for 3. But I would argue Olaf's more likely to quest multiple times than Robin Hood is. But even so, let's say you quest for 4 and they got to run 2 things into it. I get a 2-for-1 card advantage and 4 lore. Out of this, I'm pretty happy with that exchange. So this is still an A for me. How it stacks up versus Olaf, it's hard to say. But regardless, both of them you're happy. If you happen to open both of them, I would probably take this over Olaf because I think it's more likely that this is going to come out quicker than Olaf is. But I think they're really quite interchangeable and both pretty bomby. All right, Shenzi, Scar's Accomplice. So this one is kind of a reverse Peter Pan from the first chapter. It's a 2/3/1 lore evasive instead of a 3/2. But it's also got the additional abilities when it's challenging a damaged character. This character gets +2 strength. And with that 3 willpower, there's a decent chance it might challenge more than one character before it's eliminated. Now, it's not questing for a lot, but I mentioned about evasives in Amethyst, that one of the reasons I like evasive isn't just because I can quest and it's harder for you to interact with my character. It's that I can potentially challenge one of your smaller characters, and it's hard for you to eliminate it, and then I can go on questing with it afterwards, right? So I like to get one good challenge out of my evasives, if they're not questing for like really big amounts, and then I'll quest with them after that. And so Shenzi, there's a distinct possibility Shenzi could take out a few characters. So specifically, the best characters for this to take out is like a 2/4 that's been damaged, or a 2/5 or 1/5, right? Minnie Mouse, for example, the healing one, the 1/5, right? If you get a couple damage on her, then Shenzi can do the rest, something like that. I don't think it's exceptionally useful. I don't think that ability is going to come up a ton and be relevant any more than the 2/3 body is. But I think just having a 3 lore 2/3/1 evasive isn't bad. I'd mark this as a C, and I'd mark it as kind of a mid-C. But I still think you're going to be fine playing this in your deck. Little John, exactly the same as Nala. So it is a probably low C, but don't sleep on it. Zazu. Zazu might be the best 5-drop in the game. Might be. I think there's a steel one, the bodyguard, that's got something to say about that. That would be Hey. But Zazu definitely is very powerful. Think back to how much we loved Goofy in the first chapter as a 3/4/2 lore. A 3/5/2 lore evasive is going to get that challenge in that I'm looking for, assuming that I don't want to just rush and quest out for the 2 each turn. And then we'll quest for 2 subsequently, with it being very hard for my opponent to interact with. Very happy with that. One thing I would say is be very careful about if you're going to do that, run that line where you actually use him to potentially challenge. Be very careful about leaving him with only 2 willpower or less because of the steel stitch. that can deal 2 damage to characters will be prevalent. So you don't want him getting gunned down by Stitch, but otherwise, a really, really efficient body for an evasive. Love Zazu. So Zazu for me is probably a low A. Yeah, he's not bomby, but he's one of those commons that I'm going to take over a lot of rares, super rares, and legendaries. Possibly the best common in the set, but I've got the argument for one other that we're going to see in Ruby, which is completely the other end of the spectrum. Don't love this stat line on vanillas. I would rather a 3/4 2-lore evasive. The fact that it can't sing is almost irrelevant, like 99% irrelevant. But just a 4-lore, 4/3, 2-lore is not working for me. If it was a 3/4 2-lore, it would still be a C. At this point, I would call it a low C or a high D. Being 2-lore, it's probably still a C, but it's a low C. Alright. Ed, 2/3, 1-lore. When it comes to play, deal 2 damage to a chosen damaged character. Anything that necessitates my opponent having damaged characters, I'm suspect about. Like Robin Hood notwithstanding, which is so powerful that, yeah, I'll figure out a way to make that work. Ed, like, I love removal in draft. I love it, but this is too limited on an uninkable body that the body is so poor compared to the cost that I just don't think it's worth it to try and build around this. It's not bad. Like, not awful. It's bad. It's not awful. Low C, high D. I probably mark this as a D, just because there's so much else I want to be taking. But if I had to play this in my deck, I probably would. I probably wouldn't just replace it with another ink. Flora, surprisingly good if you want to rush. So, obviously, I say rush on a 1-lore body. Sure, you're not rushing for a ton. But you could get some consistent ink with this. I always found when I had this on the other side of the board and I was trying to deal with it, there wasn't any time where I really felt great about how I had to deal with it. I either had to run 2 smaller characters into it. Like normally a 2/4, I'm like, great, I can run a couple of 2/3s into it. They stay alive and we're great. But it's not a 2/4 when it's being challenged. So she doesn't do really well on the offense. If you need a board control card, this ain't it. But if your other cards are rushing, and this is one that just can consistently get you 1-lore and make it really challenging or awkward for your opponent to challenge into, yeah, that would be all right. Still probably a low C, but better than I thought she was going to be. I don't even need to read the rest of this. When I see a 1-cost 1/2 1-lore, I'm automatically off it. The fact that I can bump up one of my characters for 1 gives it some flexibility. Then it becomes a 2-cost 1/2 1-lore. So it basically becomes a flipped stat Megara from the first set, which wasn't good. But this at least has some flexibility. But the flexibility is I could either have a terrible character by itself for cheap, or a terrible character with a slightly usable ability for slightly more. It's still a terrible character. It dies to everything. It will get picked off so easily. I'm not interested. This is a D for me. Robin Hood, you got to be good for me to want a 2-cost 2/2 1. And this also wasn't it. Maybe sometimes I gain a lore out of it, but more often than not, it's just a 2-cost 2/2 1, which I'm not even excited about the 2-lore versions of this. Certainly not 1-lore. So that's a D for me as well. Use it as ink. Decent body on Fauna. Look at that body on Fauna. Oh, yeah. 5-cost 3/7 2-lore. I have no shame on this thing. 5-cost 3/7 2-lore. So much like, I think it was Merryweather that was the 2/4 +2 strength. This is going to quest really well and make it awkward for your opponent to deal with. But again, there's just so many high-quality 5-drops in this set that in other sets I might be interested in this body. In this set, it's probably a very low C for me, and I'm just hoping that I've got some of my other preferred 5-drops and I don't play this. Because 5-drops I probably want like 4, 5, 6 maybe 5-drops. And I'm really hoping this isn't one of them. So, Iago, 4-cost 2/4 1 evasive In this character quest, you may pay 2 less for the next action. Some actions are great in this set, but you're not playing many actions at all. So really, this is a 4-cost 2/4/1 evasive, and that's just not good enough. I'd rather give me the whichever the hyena was. That's the 3-cost 2/3. So I would put that as I guess a low C, just because at least it's an evasive body. Oh, here's a good aggressive body, much like the Moana, the 3-cost 3/4 2 lore. 2-cost 3/2 lore could be really good. Here's the thing. It dies just as easily as the 2-cost 2/2 lores, so don't get too excited about this one, but it's still a really efficient body. The problem with the 2-cost 2/2 lores isn't even that it gets taken out really easily, because if at least you're trading, it's not so bad. Yeah, I'm probably trading with a 1-drop, but I got 2 lore out of it. I at least traded. It's not so bad. But when they run a 3/3 into your 2/2 lore, then it feels real bad. So this at least avoids that situation where there's a 3 willpower character that is taking out your 2-drop 2 lore. So efficient body. It's probably in the B range. It's probably like a low B. I don't know. If I'm going hyper aggressive, I'm loving this. If I'm kind of a mid-range type deck, I'm still enjoying it, but I'm not like head over heels about it. So probably a low B. And number 2, 4-cost 2/4/3 lore. Damaged characters can't challenge this character. Again, something that makes the interactions really awkward. 4-cost 2/4/3 lore is really bad stat line, especially on Inkable. We've had 4-cost Inkable 4/4/3 lores, admittedly at rare, but we've still had them, right? So this is worse than that as a stat line. But the fact that damaged characters can't challenge it could lead, if you even get a second turn out of this, right? 1 turn and they take care of it without you trading with much of anything would be unfortunate. If you could get a second turn out of a 3 lore character, that's massive, right? So you might be able to throw them off just enough that if you see a board where they've got a lot of damaged characters, unless they've got a rush character, you might be able to make this happen. You play it, it goes back to them. Maybe they can play 1 character that isn't damaged. It comes back to you. If you can deal with that character or damage it in some way, then maybe you can get 2 quests off Ed. You're making a lot of work happen for a 4-cost uninkable, but there's definitely space for it. So for me, it would be like a low C. You could play it, but you're going to have to build around it. And if you're building around it, you're probably sacrificing better elements that you should be including in your deck. So don't get too excited about it, but also it could absolutely do some damage. All right, Scroop. So I've already mentioned that I'm not like head over heels about the 3-cost 2/2 lore evasives. There's definitely a place for them. They're definitely solid. This one's got 1 less willpower, but its functionality can be really high. It's a high cost. We're up to 6 lore or 6 ink by the time we can use this and its ability, at which point is the 2/1 lore evasive all that impactful? Maybe, maybe not. But if we see a situation where we can play it early, we're not being pressured by our opponent on the board, and we can all of a sudden quest with that evasive really effectively, great. And if it's later in the game and we've kind of been worn down and they got like 1 big character that we're like, we don't know what to deal with, this could be your rescue, right? So the modality of this one is a lot more impactful than, say, the Merryweather or whatever the 1-drop was, right? Does that all equate to a card that's better than, say, Archimedes, especially considering it's uninkable? Yeah, probably still. So I would say this is probably a mid to high B. It's not going to impress you all of the time, but it's going to be pretty solid most of the time, and sometimes it's going to be really impressive. All right. 7-drop Inkable. All right, so at least it's Inkable. We got that going for it. So Prince Philip here is a 3/9/3 lore. So 9 willpower on a 3 lore character, a lot harder to deal with, but by turn 7, a lot easier to deal with relative to some earlier drops. Banishing a dragon character, completely irrelevant. When he challenges a damaged character, ready this. Again, damaged characters trying to make that happen. In other words, expecting that you're just going to have a bunch of damaged characters that you can just mow down. And the question is, how excited are you about mowing down a character that maybe has 1 willpower left because it's damaged? All in all, I think you'll play this because it's inkable. So if it's just a 3/9, 3 lore body on 7 or a later turn, not the end of the world. What does that equate to? Probably like high C level, mid C level. Do not draft this highly. Your large drops are better spent. This is going to be an amazing constructed card, but Clarabelle is not good in draft. Chances are, by the time this comes out, you both just have empty hands. Yeah, if you're way behind on cards, but parity on board, and you can draw a whole bunch of cards off this, that best case scenario, that's going to be great. But chances are, by the time she gets down, you're just both with 1 card in hand, 2 cards in hand, 0 cards in hand, right? She's a 7 cost 5/6/2 lore. And that is a D. She's a D. You're still, I mean, let's be honest. You're still going to pick her. If you open her in the pack, you're taking her because she's going to be great and constructed. But I got to tell you how she rates in draft, okay? But yes, just take her for the money. Here's one that you don't have to make the choice. Anna is great in constructed and in draft. That's the modality we're looking for. Remember in Amber, we talked about the 3 cost 2/3/2 lore. We're like, this is not the stat line we're looking for. But when you can pay 2 to have at least 2 impactful effects, but one that could still be, like, don't get me wrong, adding to strength could be really impactful. It's just very often not. So that's like the 3rd best option, but sometimes that's exactly what you're looking for. Discard a card. They're down to 1 or 2 cards in hand, and you've got a board advantage. That could be huge, especially if it's 1 card they've been waiting to play. It's their big bomb. They've been waiting to play, and you nab that. Amazing. Chances are the one that's going to be best is the banished chosen damaged character. I've talked about how you don't want to try and force something that is dependent upon damaged characters, but this is not. You could just play her as a 3 cost 2/3/2 lore. Not a great stat line, but serviceable. Or you could choose one of the other 2 options. But if there's a damaged character on there where they've run, their 6/6/3 lore Olaf into your 2/2 Archimedes, poor guy, and you can eliminate it with this, mwah, right? That's obviously an amazing case situation. But even if it's like a 4/5 with 2 damage on it or something like that, that's still amazing for an additional 2 cost and getting this body to stick around. This is an A. Probably not willing to call it a bomb, but really, really good. So take this first no matter what. This should never be passed. I mean, maybe there's a card you might pass on top of it, but hopefully not. Hopefully you don't have to make that choice. Pass this to someone. No. F. Why did I even zoom in on this? This was pointless. This is an F. Do not play this. Play it for ink if you really must, but don't play it. Exerting a damaged character. Again, I mentioned it with Robin Hood. It's got to be good for me to want to play a 2 cost 2/2/1 lore. And this is not nearly good enough. I'm having to find a situation where there's a damaged character that I want to exert that isn't already exerted. Yeah. Robin Hood's Sneaky Sleuth is one that I wanted to like, but I was comparing it to almost anything else that's a 5-drop, and it would need to have 3 lore on it. I guess I'll zoom in on this one. It would have to have 3 lore for me to all of a sudden consider it to be solid. And at that point, I probably had to work too hard to make that happen, rather than just having a better 5-drop out that quests for 2 and does better things. Like, compare this to Zazu. Oh my gosh. Like, night and day, right? So, no. No thank you. Probably still a high D, but a D nonetheless. Mother Gothel. Don't love the 2 cost 1/3/1 stat line, but bouncing a character in draft can be really potent. These games usually go quick. Sometimes you'll get stalemates, but they're usually going quick. So the tempo loss of you bouncing their best characters can sometimes be massive, especially if they just played it and they're going to have to play it again. For anyone that's a Magic the Gathering nerd, that's basically a time walk at that point, right? So that can be massive. And every once in a while, if you really just need a body on the board to quest for some lore, being able to play this for 2 could be meaningful, right? So where does she land? Probably not into the B territory yet, just because there's so many other good cards in this set. But this is probably a high C, and I could even make an argument for low B. Clarabelle. Amazing, amazing on the play. Ink on the draw. But honestly, I'll take that. Where it's like, if I just got to ink this on the draw, unless I've got like a really aggressive play out where I'm dropping like 1-drop, 2 1-drops, and then Clarabelle, I might be able to get in where they have more cards in hand. But on the play, 3-drop, 2/3 draw card. We already loved Maleficent in set 1 draft, Maleficent Sorceress. 2/2 draw card. On the play, Clarabelle, awesome. Love it. So where does that land? I mean, it's only really good half of the time, or if you can be really aggressive. So probably lands at like a low B, like probably the bottom of the barrel B, but still one that I'm happy to pick up mid-game, mid-draft, mid-pack. Sorry. Blah, 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 blah. Shenzi is like a build-around deck, and you shouldn't be drafting many of these hyenas anyway, so Shenzi is a low D. 3/6/1 body you'd still play if you absolutely had to, but Mother Gothel I think is just too slow. Really good, but they get to choose. That's the big thing. Like compare this to Genie in set 1. 3/4 2 lore evasive that you got to choose the character that got bounced. Obviously it didn't have shift, but again, I mean, yeah, you might shift this on the 2-cost 1/3 because you're going to play that card, right? But even then, like, you should so rarely be shifting unless there's just like the perfect situation for you to shift. Shifting should not be your general recourse because you're giving yourself card disadvantage. But the real breaker for me is that they choose what character they return. If they've got a good comes into play ability they want to benefit from, that hurts. If they've got a really low drop that they don't care about, if they got something that's about to die, like they've got a lot of opportunity for this not to be a big blow to them. There's very few times where if they get to choose, it's going to be a blowout, right? You got them down to 1 character in play. Yeah, then it's amazing, right? It's a blowout. But other than that, it's a little slow for me. It's still good. I still want to play this, but I almost wonder if I'd rather have like the knock over this, the 6-cost Amethyst Spirit Horse. I don't know. It's a tight one, but don't draft this too highly. For me, this is probably like a mid to high C. Maybe it's a low B, but probably not. I need to play with it more, but I'm very confident that it's not going to be great. Scar, love it, right? The ward's going to protect it a lot of the time. There isn't mass damage in this set. There's no grab your swords, right? So it's going to survive if you hold it back. And yeah, it's still damaged characters. You're not getting draws every time, right? But as opposed to something that you have to build around, it's inevitable that at some point there will be a damaged character and you can take some good card advantage of this. So you just don't play it until you can, right? Don't just play it naked on the board unless you have no other play. Play it when you know you're going to challenge into something that is damaged. And the great thing is you don't even have to banish it, right? If it's just damaged and you just want to run something small into it to draw your card to try and find an answer or something like that, you can. So love this. It's only got 1 lore, so it's not going to be like absolutely game breaking. But there's situations where it will be. And I think most of the time it's going to get you good value. It's going to get you like 2 or 3 for 1. So at that point it becomes like a low A, high B for me. Maybe it should be solidly an A. Hypnotic Deduction is fine. It's a card that you'll play, but you probably shouldn't. So what does that mean? A low C? Yeah, you'll filter a card out of it, right? You don't get any card advantage. You used a card to go up 1 card from the 3 that you're looking at. You draw 3 and put 2 back, right? The problem is it puts it on the top of your deck, right? If you had some really mid cards where you're like, oh, okay, I draw 3 cards that are great and I can put 2 on the bottom of my deck, that would make a big difference. But if anyone knows Magic the Gathering, we call this a brainstorm lock, where it's like, I got to put 2 cards back that I don't really like, and I know that that's what I'm drawing for the next 2 turns. Great, I'm kind of stuck. So you're only doing card selection, not card advantage. And there's just better things to be doing. So, yeah, low C, high D. Night Howler Rage is another one that should be really, really good, but is just, it might be a little bit too slow. Draw a card, always good, right? Reckless isn't even necessarily always about getting them to challenge. Yeah, if you can bait it such that they have to run their 2/2 Evasive Archimedes into one of your big characters, magnifique, right? Fantastic. But sometimes it's just the fact that they can't quest, right? Again, those late turns where it's like they're going to win on their next turn, but you could win on the turn after, and all you got to do is prevent one of their quests. This could be huge, right? But there's so much other things to do. Again, I feel like this is a really good set for draft. So a card like this that would be more valuable in other sets might not be here. So I'm going to argue that that's probably a low C again. But it can be very effective sometimes. You're welcome. You should never be using this. I've seen people talk about drafting it, and it blows my mind. It is... I know it can hit items and locations. Items don't matter in this set. Locations will very rarely matter. So I just want to focus on the characters. Most of our cards are going to be characters, right? So it is effectively Yzma, which was already something you only wanted to use. This is the 4/4 Yzma from Floodborn, right? You only wanted to use her in like a last-ditch situation. Like, all else has failed. I need to get rid of this character. I'm giving it 2 cards. At least you were left with a 4/4 2-lore body. This isn't even that. I understand you can sing it. Singing it is really powerful. You don't have to pay ink if you've got a 4 cost that you want to use. But removing one of their characters, but letting them draw 2 cards? Yikes. The card disadvantage, yes. Again, there will be situations where this is useful for you. But those amount of situations versus the times where you're just like, I can't be giving them 2 cards right now. They're going to blow me out. You're effectively netting them. It is a 3-for-1, right? You used 1 card. You're giving them another 2 to get rid of one of theirs. That is a 3-for-1 card advantage in their favor. And there's a distinct possibility you paid ink for it. But even just singing, you're still using a resource that you could use for questing or challenging, right? It's not free, it's just you didn't have to pay ink for it. So it's a 3-for-1 card advantage in their favor that you had to pay some asset for. That's an F. That's an F with ink, so you can use it as ink if you have to. Here's one that's an F without ink, so it's just a hard F, right? No. We talked about with Clarabelle, this is so rarely going to happen, and then you don't even get a body that you do with Clarabelle, and it's uninkable. Get out of here. Prince John's Mirror, some of you are going to think, oh, I could get this out on the play on turn 3 and then make them discard a bunch of cards. Maybe. But 1, you're still not affecting the board. So they could rush you out if they're being really aggressive. And 2, if you don't drop this on turn 3 and you top deck it on turn 7, you're feeling real bad. So, no, it's an F. Obscura Sphere. You can give all your characters Ward. There's so few things that Ward really cares about in this set that, yeah, you're still probably going to have in your deck as ink, and maybe every once in a while, you're just like, if they can't do anything this turn, if I've got all my characters Ward, I'm going to win. Yes, there will be times like that. So it's a D, put it in your deck as ink, and every once in a blue moon, maybe it becomes useful. Emerald Chromacon, it's a nice ability, but for a 3 cost uninkable that doesn't do anything right off the hop and requires your opponents to do specific things on their turn, probably not enough. You're probably just getting too far behind. So that's probably an F as well. It's a powerful ability, so it could be useful, but I have a feeling that's an F. Sherwood Forest, a location that doesn't gain lore, and I've got to pay 2 to put my character here, then another 1 to use an ability to only target damaged characters. No, that is a hard F. Tropical Rainforest can be annoying, but a 3-cost location with only 6 willpower, yes, it gains lore. Yes, it has an interesting ability, but they're just going to wipe it out easily and almost for free, and it's probably not going to even phase them. So I would mark this as a low D. Maybe every once in a while it becomes relevant to just stall them. But no, I wouldn't want to be playing with that. And that's Emerald. We did it. I don't know what time we're at, but oh, look at that. Oh, we might be under 45 minutes this time. Oh my gosh. You guys are so wonderful for being here. I hope you're getting something out of this. Leave something in the comments if you feel like there's something that's got you thinking maybe a little bit differently than you had, and you feel like you're starting to agree there. Like, I love the feedback. Give me your thoughts. Tell me an area where you think I'm absolutely wrong. Tell me an area where you're like, oh, I changed hearts and minds, man. Let me know. Would love to hear it. Thank you all so much for being here. I'm having a blast. Glad to be back. Hope you're all having a good time too, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.